Our speaker today was a co-founder at FeedBurner, has moved on, but continues to be involved in the startup and the technology communities here in Seattle. In his current role as the Chief Design Officer at Big Door Media, Matt Shobe is doing some pretty amazing work, I think, in the space around gamification and, you know, at a higher level, thinking about how design and interactions affect us as we kind of move through these experiences online. So, without further ado, Matt Shobe.
Thank you, David. There's the audio. Fantastic. I guess we should. Okay, getting caught on the cable. All right, let's hear it for pratfalls. Part of the act. So, kind of on the topic of, there we go. Yeah. Kind of on the topic of projection. I don't need a microphone. I'll work analog here. Let's see if this can go. So David also mentioned that Techstars is providing the space, and the Techstars offices are upstairs on the second floor here at 511. Let me get this. There we go. Okay. Going to stand now, or at least move my laptop over here. Were any of you at the demo day presentations last night for Techstars? Anyone? Okay, one or two people. What I wanted to point out was that was so my background in general has been in working with small teams, small companies, startups. I've had some time and experience with larger corporations. The most recent of which was at Google, so I got a really interesting view into how UX works at a large organization that's sort of radically decentralized and does not have a big top-down structure, which you'd kind of expect from small startups. So Google, in a way, from a UX perspective, is very sort of startup-y, at least in the ads group where I worked a big amount of my time. But the thing I wanted to point out about what happened at Techstars last night is this: if you're not familiar with the program, it's a startup accelerator / incubator. 10 teams are selected from hundreds of applicants. They then go into a 16, or well, I'm sorry, not 16. It's more like a 10 or 11 week intensive period of working on the idea that they have and then demoing it to a crowd of investors and interested persons at the end of the process. It got started in Boulder a few years ago. It's also in Boston, New York, taken off big time in New York, and Seattle's on its second year. And we had an incredible 10 teams last night. And what I think I wanted to point out mostly for this audience was just how central great design is to the products that you're seeing out there. Some really killer, interesting business models around disrupting the payment space and healthcare. And let me think, what were some of the other? And simplifying design and marketing and promotion for small businesses. But the fact is, if you go look at any of the articles that were posted, if you GeekWire, local technology blog and sort of overall survey publication has a great write-up on what you saw last night. And I just was really proud of the fact that designers were as much part of the founding teams of this set of startups as the chief technology officer or the CEO was a designer in some cases. And that's kind of a sea change or a bit of a shift, I think, in terms of the kind of roles you typically see in startups. I mean, you might have traditionally thought of it as being very technology first, and we'll figure out the design parts of that later, or bring in somebody to pretty it up. You know, I know that's not the way we think about things, but traditionally, that might have been more of the attitude from the venture capital community. And now you see folks from an investment role and others looking at startups like these and saying, all right, what's your design strategy look like? Who have you got running your user experience and your usability evaluation? How are you validating the product as you're going forward? How are you making sure you're going to get users and they're going to be delighted and amazed and hopefully not mystified by this awesome technology you're building? So that was pretty inspirational for me. And I think what I've got for you today, there's a little bit of gamification and sort of game design elements to some of the stuff we saw last night, so I'm not bringing any of that together, but just because last night is still kind of ringing in my head, I wanted to kind of point that out and mention that to you, and especially if you haven't checked out Techstars yourself. Let's see if this finally works, to be sure to do so. And, okay, window, presentation. full screen? Can it be done? Perhaps. All right. So let me get into the meat of what I've got in mind here. So again, let's see, what else do I want to say introductory-wise? Nope, I already got over the really late night, last night part. Just to sort of back all the way up and talk a little bit about gamification. Gamification is a new term. It's kind of a fiddly, sort of awkward term, but it has managed to bundle up the set of companies and the set of people thinking about the space of how to integrate game mechanics to non-gaming experiences. This is essentially figuring out how to take what makes play, what makes gaming, what makes that sort of engagement part of games that you've played on paper boards, online, in different media with your friends. Social is a massive part of this because solo games only get you so far. I mean, there's solitaire and there's first-person shooters, and then there's a whole other world of things where you're actually talking with, competing with, collaborating with other people. And gamification is generally trying to figure out how to apply this to spaces that are broader than the traditional game design spaces that you've got in mind. And I want to kind of show you some of the, walk you through some of the people that are thinking about the space and already talking about how to apply it to design and apply it to your product thinking, some of the critics, and then I think for 15 minutes or so, go through some examples that I just think are really interesting gamified experiences. They're not traditional games, they're not traditional content, they're kind of moving toward the middle of how this hybrid of gamified experience comes together. And hopefully that will spur some discussion that we've got in mind here. And hopefully you've come here today and with some of you are probably game designers, some of you are designers from all different stripes and all different aspects. And I'm hoping that you had some examples or some challenges or some good and bad examples that you've had in mind. I'd be happy to bring those up and have those discussed before. But gamification, again, going way back before it was called gamification, how many of you are members of frequent flyer programs or something where you earn points that you can redeem for something? Just about everyone. That is the original sort of keeping track, keeping score, earning something to redeem it later. But it's a very sort of shallow level of engagement, relatively speaking. The airline knows you flew X miles. When you've flown Y miles, you'll get a reward of some kind for that, and that's great. But that doesn't really have much of a social aspect to it. It's only one aspect of your relationship with the airline, and there is certainly more that could be done on that score. I'm going to get the power on here so that that doesn't happen again. Certainly more that could be done on that score. And so let's take a look at some other things that we've got. All right. Let's get the video back. Good. Okay. So just going a quick survey of some of the thinking that's out there. So there is a fellow by the name of Gabe Zekerman, game designer, worked in marketing for many years. He's written a book published under O'Reilly's imprint called Gamification by Design that talks about, it's really, I think it's the first book specifically published around gamification and this kind of thinking. It's a controversial book. There are folks who look at it and say this is only a shallow survey of what's actually going on here. This does not cover enough aspects of what really makes great game design applicable to other non-game scenarios. There are other folks that say this is a great primer. I hadn't thought about this way before. This at least puts a bunch of concepts in front of me that I can take and run with and do something with, and it's good to see them all in one place. I heard both sides of the table on this at a gamification summit in New York in September. I think this book came out around that same time, mid-September. So that is one of the first publications I've seen that kind of tries to summarize everything. You'll find lots of scattered resources and opinions and blog posts out there, but this is one of the first that brings it all together in one place. Now, Amy Jo Kim, let me grab her slide deck here that is the same thing as what she's got up there, is a noted game designer, and she has been working on a variety of thoughts and has a one-day class and a number of other things that she's put together that talk about how to think about gamification and how to think about really going back to the fundamentals of game design for non-game designers that we've participated in. Big Door's been involved with. I attended one day. Basically, I worked with a couple of the teams just sort of as a mentor, as kind of a helper at the session. And so she talks about Let's see, where is one of the examples that she's got? She's got essentially a set of 7 core concepts that she wants you to focus on when you're thinking about how to gamify a particular experience. And it really comes down to, in my mind, audience. I think one of the smartest things about this, she talks about engagement and flow, the idea that if a game is too challenging, you'll get frustrated. You've all experienced this. A game is too challenging, you'll get frustrated and you'll dive out of it. If it's too easy, achievement isn't meaningful, and that's equally fatiguing. It's like, all right, great, I got to level 38 in 5 minutes. What's the point of this? Finding that flow state of balancing challenge with reward and making sure that you stay engaged and are onboarded, brought into and introduced to the game in a meaningful way is one of the main concepts she talks about. And one of the others that I really like is that she talks about the different kinds of gamers. There are, of course, you think games, you normally think competition, competitiveness, and that's certainly one aspect of it, but she also talks about collaboration. Let me see, where are they? Yes, expression, the idea that a game, you might have seen, I should have a slide for this. You might have seen, how many of you have heard of or / would admit to playing Farmville? Okay, heard of. Good, right. Played for research purposes only. So what has been interesting is Farmville is a game that, again, it looks like most of you have seen it. You can, on Facebook, build a farm, they have and sell goods and interact with others and buy things to make your farm cooler and better and faster and stronger. And the same model applies to other themes that Zynga as a game company has launched. And one of the interesting things you see there is that it's not just about the collaboration or working with others or trading with others aspect. There's an expression angle to it. People have built sort of pixel art with their farms, and they move the flowers and the bushes and trees and buildings around to create something when you zoom all the way out to the Mona Lisa or something to that effect, or spelled out a message, you know, mom send money down to last 50 bucks at school, that sort of thing. And just the fact that unintended consequences arise from carefully planned and designed game systems like this, I think that's one of the points that she likes to make. And I've got a set of links at the end of this. She's got her slideshow for this Smart Gamification Summit on SlideShare, so you can walk through that and get a sense of what she's talking about. But expression, competition, collaboration, and exploration are the 4 major things that she talks about as the kinds of spaces that game design should consider for any sort of purpose, and especially when you're thinking about non-game content. If your audience is all about sharing experience or collaborating to work on something, a leaderboard or a point system that helps differentiate people and ranks them probably isn't the right mechanic to apply. So it's not just there's 1 or 2 sets of brushes that you can paint any game design or gamification solution onto any possible system. There are a variety, and it's like anything else. It's becoming nuanced and experienced in picking the right ones for your purposes. And now, just to make it clear that not everyone sees gamification in anything remotely close to a positive light, a noted video game theorist, critique, and designer, Ian Bogost, has said, quite simply, gamification is bullshit. He calls it, I can't remember if it was in this article or in the comments or somewhere else, he coined the term exploitationware, that it is essentially a way for marketers to have a safe way to tell their board, we have a new strategy for increasing engagement. It's called gamification. It's going to work. It's going to be fantastic. Our adoption rates are going to go through the roof. And it's not game design. It's just another way to manipulate consumers. And the bullshit is used to conceal, impress, or to coerce. I wanted to put this out there because if you're going to go back and look at this, or you might have looked at it already before, there are certainly opinions out here like this from noted, experienced, heavily engaged game designers, and others that follow along. If you go look at the comments thread here, it scrolls for days, just like almost any high-profile discussion of gamification seems to have. And my personal feeling about this is, yeah, absolutely, things can go sideways if you don't design a good experience, but I put a lot of faith in consumers these days to walk if you put something out there that they don't like. I don't think people are easily coerced or easily bamboozled into, unless you're talking about phishing scams or things that are genuinely fraudulent. Just bad design is bad design, and people are going to go, I don't have time for this. My attention is so scattered already anyway. Why would I spend any time with this? And even great games, you eventually fatigue on or feel a sense of fatigue. We'll talk about that a little later as one of the sort of challenges of game design. So let me get right into some examples of what I consider gamified experiences. They're somewhere between content and pure game design, and you're probably familiar with some, maybe most of these, hopefully not all of them, so I'm hoping this isn't just a review for most of you. Not this guy, but going back to gamification, gaming of sort of the competitive aspect of how am I doing relative to somebody else is as old as web analytics or analytics about anything. This is my card from Klout.com, K-L-O-U-T. If you use Twitter a lot, you might be familiar with this. You might have even seen this number out there. It's essentially my sort of credibility rating, and I'm right in the middle of the pack with a 46, so yay 46. It's not a prime number. I guess I've got that going for me. It essentially allows you to see how you stack up, what their system thinks you're influential about. And I know 46 is not 76. I don't know if it's a nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. It's not a nominal scale. It's at least an ordinal scale. So I know I'm ranked higher than someone else, but I don't really know if 46 is one better than 45 or what. But nonetheless, systems like these provide a sense of how am I doing compared to someone else, and they, of course, give you some incentives to how can I do better. Now, that's at sort of the individual level. At the enterprise level, there's been ComScore, there's been Compete.com, there's been Nielsen Analytics, there have been all sorts of both inferential and direct statistical measurement systems to tell you where you stand. So you see the traffic for CreativeMornings.com. So just running this against, intriguingly, the competitive rank, I don't think CreativeMornings.com and SwissMiss.com are actually really competing with each other. But nonetheless, those are sites that they consider to be similar, and you can plot all these together and you can see how am I doing. Once again, it's the whole ranking thing. It's this whole idea that analytics give you a sense of how you stack up compared to someone else. So this is kind of one of those OG game design or gamification examples. I'm also partly responsible for this with FeedBurner. We didn't ever produce our own leaderboards, our own ranking system, or put anything out there. And just to back up once again, FeedBurner is a set of services for people to understand how popular their content in syndication is. RSS feeds, Atom feeds. When your content, if you're a blogger or a large commercial publisher, you want to find out how's my content getting distributed via that mechanism. FeedBurner is a service that can tell you that. And we were able to calculate fairly accurately the number of subscribers or readers coming back to check out your content day after day. We'd give you this little chiclet that would allow you to tell. This is from Google's official blog. They've got 600,000 subscribers, so it's a very big number. That would give you an idea of how big is this person's audience, how important are they. So, certainly that sort of vanity metric, people love that kind of stuff. But we put that out there, but people would use our API to build their own leaderboards and say, here are the top 20 tech blogs are doing on FeedBurner. And well, we enabled that, and it certainly was part of the deal there. And there's an insatiable urge in certain verticals for finding out how am I doing. So that's always been part of this thing. So let's change gears a little bit. How many of you have a Fitbit? A few people. Cool. Fitbit is a system that gives you this little device that can essentially track your activity across a whole range of different things. Walking upstairs, jogging through the park, getting up from your desk and walking to the kitchen, or going up and down the stairs in your office instead of taking the elevator. It becomes a sort of motivator to take more action, to do more things, because it's tracking your performance, your level of activity. And what it does is it gives you a nice big dashboard of steps taken, miles traveled, an activity score, your stats. It makes it social. It makes it expressive, to use Amy Jo's Kim aspect of things. Is you can post to Twitter all you want about how much you are or aren't exercising, so that you can opt in to having the social pressure of, hey, Shobe, I thought you were training for that 5K. What happened there? I didn't see any run posts from you this week. To working with a group to work together to train for that 5K, or to do whatever you might have as a shared goal as a group. And they've provided a whole platform for doing this, from both the hardware to the software, and bringing the social aspect of this to this, and the stats aspect to it. I realize it's a dashboard. It doesn't look like something with a leaderboard and levels and badges and all of that. And I kind of want to get away from the idea that gamification is always about those very sort of extrinsic, obvious motivators. It's stuff like this that really gets into you and makes you think, did I get my Fitbit on today, and am I going to get a number that's better this week than last week, that starts to motivate you for a good purpose. Hopefully, in this case, there are more things moving you towards making healthier choices, like platforms like Fitbit. And there are a bunch out there. Nike Plus has this great game design where they can show your stats relative to others, a really flashy app for showing your stats, and that's the system that allows you to put a chip in your shoe and track your runs. And there are a good number of other examples from companies like Garmin as well. So Seattle company, Mindbloom, what they've got is a system that is all about tracking and taking meaningful action. You have to spend a little bit more time with it, and I admit I haven't spent a ton of time with it, and I have this brown bush with the leaves falling off of it as a result, but they have this great feedback mechanism that shows this leaf colors are visual activity meters. You've set up activities for my health, for relationships, to spur my own creativity, to improve my self-worth, my sense of self, my overall, how high am I on Maslow's pyramid, I guess, to make myself a better person. And they do track it in a more gamified way. You've got this tree that has what game designers call juicy feedback. When you get a new leaf or you make a new accomplishment, I think I ate one piece of fruit and then clicked a button, and so I got 5 water droplets here, and the tree started to sparkle. And I also got my tree produced 80 seeds today, and moved me it's getting me closer to moving from level 2 to level 3. And so by having these kind of classic mechanics of levels that unlock more capabilities and feedback that lets me know I'm accomplishing something, and having it tied to real world goals and real world motivation, you'd hope that would help me be healthier, have better relationships, hopefully be more creative, learn how to work out my issues with the lav mic before I get on stage, all these sorts of things that would make for a better way to go through every day. And they're just getting started. Well, they've been around for a little while, but they're just getting this thing put together. But it's a really interesting system because it's focused centrally not on, hey, we've got this cool content and we'd like you to spend more time with it, but we have you in mind, and we're going to create this system that's all around providing reinforcement for the things that you're doing well, that you said you wanted to do more of, do better, generally improve. So I think that that's a good one to check out. So this is one disclaimer. This is one that Big Door worked on. And how many of you are baseball fans? Okay. How many of you collected baseball cards at one point in time? Fascinating. More hands went up collecting baseball cards than say they're baseball fans. I think baseball's got some challenges. So a collection mechanic you think would be something that would make sense for a sport like baseball. And so what MLB worked with us to do was to experiment this past summer. I don't know how many of you saw this, unless you spent a lot of time with MLB.com up on your screen. You might not have, but it was an interesting experiment. This is a game day feature. They allow you to see a game that's in progress, and there were a bunch in progress on this day. And throughout the baseball season, 162 games per team and 32 teams playing. There are a lot of baseball games going on. And if you're at work, especially on Pacific time, all the baseball starts around 10 o'clock and then start to about 4 o'clock. If your favorite team is back east and you want to follow them, this is a great way to do it. You're probably not going to be able to watch a video feed. Maybe you are, but in general, having a window open that shows you what the score is, who's up next, all this is kind of cool. But what they wanted to do to drive a little bit more engagement and spend a little more time with this was offer badges. And what these are these little player badges. So if Orlando Cabrera for the Indians got a single in this game, I would get the little Orlando Cabrera chip. If I then came back to another Indians game later and Orlando got a home run or something, then I'd get the silver version of his chip. So there was kind of a progression level with given players, as well as getting a whole bunch of different players from a whole bunch of different teams. So the idea was collect all these cool little chips. They kind of look a little bit like poker chips, but that's okay. I think they're still pretty cool design with the players in there, and they're all colored for the teams. And you end up with this trophy case with all these badges in it. And this is actually my trophy case. I didn't get nearly as many as I should have, but I got a fair number out of this. The challenge with this, though, is speaking of, you talk about collaboration and expression and competition. This isn't particularly competitive. I've got a count of these badges, which is cool. I've got them all over here. But do you see any share or tweet buttons on this? This is a screenshot. This is not a mock-up. Do you see any way for me to put that out in the wild? I dropped the URL up here, but it was this horrible multi-parameterized URL. It was not this shareable thing at all that most people just go, thanks, I got a bunch of badges. What we did not manage to get Major League Baseball down to able to do this year, but we'll see about in the future, is the idea of making this a whole lot more social. Because if you think about the whole baseball card thing, you got those, you get together with your friends, you trade them, you keep the superstar and MVP cards for yourself, or those are really high value ones. There's this inherently social aspect of, look at the stuff I've got, let me see the stuff you've got, that's cool, maybe we can make our collections better if we trade them. Or just look how engaged a baseball fan I am. I saw all these games this year, and I feel like sharing it with you. So there's this. And unfortunately, no way to really get that out there in the wild. So how many of you have played turntable? Okay, I expected at least a few hands. This, I think, is one of the most interesting things that's going out there right now. It's a shared music experience site, and there's even a mobile app to it as well. People choose to DJ. They play some music. You can play some music if you can get up on the table. And as you spend more time here, first of all, people can rate when you're on stage. They can rate your song by clicking the lame or awesome button. The more awesomes you get, the more points you get. The more points you get, the more likely it is you'll be able to, well, not likely, but for sure, you'll be able to customize your avatar. I happened to take these screenshots on Halloween, so they had this special set of Halloween avatars going here. And as you can also see, going back to the original page, there's chat. There's, music is inherently social. You want to talk about the bands you like. You want to talk to the friends that you've got or the people that you don't necessarily know over here about whatever's going on in the room. And I think that there are a bunch of different rooms you can go to. You can share everything that's going on, and eventually once you get these ranks, like I said, you can get all these avatars. And they're just beginning to start to scratch the surface of what you might be able to earn or what you might be able to get by showing through your points, through what you've got as a music fan and as somebody who's recognized in a given room. This guy, DJ Wu, I think has like 39,000 points or even more than that, as like a celebrity on this site. So it's creating a real social experience. It's got a really simple but effective tracking system. And your status, yes, down in the crowd, you can't necessarily see that your avatar is really hard to get one. But you've got that sort of social standing thing. You've got, but it's not super competitive necessarily. It's definitely more collaborative, and I think it's an awful lot of fun. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. Yeah.
How do you get up to the table?
Well, there has to be an open seat. In this case, this is one of the busiest rooms. It's almost always their max per room is like 200 people. I'm like stunned that they can support that many people at a time, and plus with the streaming to that many people. But if somebody jumps down, one of the moderators will like hold a space and say, you can get up here now. But in the less busy rooms, it'll just say open spot, and you just click on it, and then you're there. And then you look for a song, search for it, find it, put it in your queue, and then play it when you're up, or it just automatically plays. So it's very simple. The actual UI mechanics are straightforward, but the social aspect of it is what keeps you coming back and coming back for more. And one interesting thing you see with the rooms here is you'll see Twitter room. I forget some of the other company names that I've seen up there. The Facebook dubstep room or something like that. You'll see companies like putting a public room out where some of their employees will be hanging out. I don't know if they end up like doing support through Turntable or anything like that. Gosh, I hope not. But nonetheless, the idea that there are going to be communities of interesting fans of certain kinds of music from certain companies can be expressed through here or not. And it's just, I think it's got a lot of potential, and the game layer aspect of it that helps you identify who you are and how influential you are, I think is pretty substantial. Let's see, time-wise, we're doing all right. Yep, so Foldit. How many of you have heard of Foldit here, a project out of the University of Washington? Not many, okay. Solve puzzles for science. What they are about, and I kind of started with the wrong page first, I suppose I had to go to this one, is they have a game that allows you to unfold and simplify and create new shapes for proteins. And you do these with these 3D shapes, and the whole point of this is that by doing so, you're actually, what the Foldit project is doing is crowdsourcing a hard problem, which is for supercomputers and other computing resources to unfold and figure out shapes of proteins that can then be addressed by drugs to solve for things like HIV and infectious disease and all sorts of medical treatments, as well as looking for combinations and things that proteins they didn't know were capable of before. Humans can do this pretty well. They can take these protein chains and unstring them and bend them into shapes that are, I forget what the term they use for it is, simplified, I can't remember it, but a bunch of people doing this can solve a whole bunch of problems in parallel that would take an awful long time, and that computers just aren't as good at doing this spatial relationship thing as people. So by doing this, and they've gamified it to the sense that if you have these, I think these protein receptors or binders, if they kind of hook together in what the original designed protein is, they're called clashes. So one of the first things you do with one of these proteins is clear the clashes. You kind of bend these little gates out of the way. And get some feedback for that. You get this, like I said, the juicy feedback before. the congratulations message. This is a screenshot from the desktop application that you install, and you download a bunch of proteins and start to unbend them and there are some tracks they have where there are particular proteins of particular kinds that you work through, and you accomplish a mission, and you can kind of essentially take care of a whole series at once. And then you're recognized for it. Apologies, the font is super tiny on this, but there's a global rank, there's a global score. This is kind of a fun competitive thing because, yeah, okay, I can be the #1 protein unfolder, but ultimately we're all doing good for a larger purpose, or at least so we hope. And I have a rank and a best score and how I fit with a particular puzzle category. There are achievements that you can earn as somebody taking and working through a series of these puzzles. And they got some pretty significant press, I think, a little while ago, and I think it's just, and like this guy's in Slovenia, got global access and global reach as you'd expect a web-based system hopefully to have. I just think it's really impressive that they decided not just to put a problem-solving situation or problem-solving app out there and say, help us unfold proteins, but they decided to add an aspect of game design to this to make it fun, to make it competitive a little bit at least, and to provide that motivation, that reason for engagement to come back over time. And I think that, let's see, oh yeah, we already looked at that. So that's kind of walked through all of my examples, yeah, I've got a couple other things to kick off the discussion part of things, but some challenges that generally apply to what we're calling gamification. You can't, like I said before, well, no, I didn't say this before. There I am misquoting myself. If your content is static, if there's nothing interesting there in the first place, adding a game layer to it, adding a leaderboard for most number of comments or something like that, or a reward center of some kind, that isn't going to help. You got to have great content. You got to have a reason for people to come here in the first place. I think that goes back to that whole, well, I did say something about this. Consumers will walk and your audience will lose interest if you don't provide reasons for them to come back over time. I think we all sort of understand that, but it's one of those things that gamification is not something that's just going to supercharge what is otherwise not particularly great content. Again, designing the right game for the wrong motivations. This kind of comes back to that idea of if you wanted to design something that was going to grant points that would show the difference in rank between different people, and that community is more about collaboration and expression and sharing, it's not going to work. Nobody's going to want to participate in a system that rewards or incents behaviors that aren't native to that system in the first place. So this is kind of, I guess, a classic design / exposition challenge of needing to understand and know your audience. Who are you designing for, and what's going to motivate them, and what's going to be interesting to them? I think the Fold It team didn't necessarily know that something competitive would be the right aspect to this, but by providing at least some sort of a reinforcement system and a way to be recognized for not just participating in the system to some extent, but being really engaged, they created something that got a lot more people interested in coming back more frequently over time. I think we all know this. Even the best games, you can't play Monopoly. I mean, yes, it could be a rainy weekend at the cabin. You could play a nonstop Monopoly marathon, but by the end of it, kind of, all right, I've bought Baltic Avenue enough times to know that I should stop buying Baltic Avenue. Can we play something else now? Eventually, all games fatigue their players, so a game design, Turntable right now, going gangbusters, got all that great stuff going on there. Music, in theory, is self-refreshing. New artists, new music always comes out. New tastemakers get identified. And it's like there's DJ Wu today, maybe there'd be DJ Wee in 6 months. But what will keep people coming back? Will it be a never-ending string of avatars? Will it be access to musicians? Will it be things you can't get otherwise? What will be the thing that keeps something like Turntable FM fresh over time? And then I think there's also this aspect to it that is, there's this new design or editorial burden for already harried content management staff. By that I mean if you're going to add a game layer to, say, a content network, and that's going to involve things like you designing a mission or a quest or something, a series of steps or tasks for someone to walk through in order to earn an achievement or to visit content that might be off to the side from the standard front page stuff that you've got. You want to go explore some of the greatest hits from your archive, for example. okay, you can design a few of those to get people started, you can get them onboarded with that, but once you've gone through that first series of a half dozen of these missions or quests, you have to design the next half dozen and then the next half dozen, and is just going through these quests going to be enough? Probably not. You're going to need to do something else to provide for reinforcement and provide for the social aspect of things. Like if you want people to be recognized for sharing, you need to take care of that in some way. And what does that look like as you continue to work on that over time? So let's see. So I've also made this deck public for reference in the future with the examples that I walked through here. And that's essentially the set of examples that I had to walk through for you, as well as the quick survey of the folks that are kind of talking about gamification. So we've got some time left. I wanted to open the floor up now to any questions you might have. And I think David's got the mic.
Do you have any examples of companies that are giving away merchandise or discount credits for competing in a game?
Sure. Well, I mean, going back to just the simple loyalty systems, there are a lot of them out there that have, you can redeem the points or the miles that you get for flight rewards or something like that. We're starting to trial some stuff right now with some other content networks where you can redeem the points that you earn for local sporting event tickets, for passes to a local museum, for some simpler things at local merchants and that sort of thing. I think also if you look at Groupon, we've all certainly heard of Groupon and daily deal sites. There's a game mechanic in play there. I mean, yes, they're daily deals and you're getting a coupon and it's an offer and okay, will I act on this or not? But typically those are only available for 24 hours or some limited period of time. And once that deal is gone, it's closed and that's the end of that. And I think creating sort of that sense of scarcity about something, or be it real or artificial, is another one of those things that tends to motivate action. And so I think that you've seen from sort of the daily deals community and other sort of offers platforms, that sort of thing starting to appear. And I think that's coming back to kind of game design. There are kind of two different kinds of rewards or motivators that you can provide. There's extrinsic, which are discounts or offers or things like that. Like you looked at the Major League Baseball example. One thing that you could have done there, for example, in that case would be there's an awful lot of swag that you can buy with your team's logo on it and gear and that sort of thing. If I had gotten a whole bunch of player badges, much like S&H green stamps that our parents cashed in that they got at the grocery store to get a bike or something like that back in the day, you'd think you'd be able to redeem that for maybe goods, maybe something like that. And that's a very sort of extrinsic motivator. What I think would be a more intrinsic motivator, is going to be certainly recognition that you are somebody who is a very engaged fan. If you've maybe completed some other baseball quizzes or something like that, you're a very knowledgeable fan. And then maybe it's not so much extrinsic, but you give somebody who is not only spending a lot of time on the site and answering a lot of questions and earning a lot of these badges and whatnot, you give them something like 30 minutes of time on Skype with a baseball analyst or one of the main writers, or you get, because you live in a city, you're in Seattle, you get a chance to go down to the dugout or something before, or go down to the bullpen before the game or something like that. You get some access or get something that is special in a way that other folks can't get it. I think that that's one of the aspects that I think we're just starting to see this kind of game design explore, because you can only give away certain kinds of rewards and certain kinds of the more extrinsic type stuff for so long. I think eventually you need to, especially if you have relationships that you can leverage, you need to be able to provide those kinds of things for the folks that are really engaged. And in fact, the kind of thing where if you've got somebody who spends an awful lot of time submitting comments, helping others, if you're in a situation where you have an application design or something like that, which has its own support forum. At FeedBurner we had this, it was a very simple thing. If you have like a support forum, you have people that answer an awful lot of questions, and they aren't your employees, they're people who are just really interested in the product. Well, we gave that guy like a level 50 super maven ranking, and he had his own special badge and all of that, but and I eventually found out this one particular guy was a college student in Hong Kong who whose knowledge of the system got considerably better than my own in like 6 or 9 months there. He was answering detailed questions about XML specifications that I would have just gone, it'll compile someday. We'll figure it out, don't worry. And eventually, of course, I sent him some T-shirts and stuff, but I was like, the least I can do is send you something with a FeedBurner logo on it. And he's like, thank you for that. That was great. And it was like $800 to ship it overseas, or 6 months on a boat. I forget what, but it seemed like it took too long. But what mattered to him the most was just the fact that he could get early access to new features that we were launching, or that he could know about things ahead of time so that he could be more prepared to talk about them in these forums. I mean, that's kind of an extreme example of you get somebody so on your side that they're like, wow, give me some access. But I think that those are the kind of things, if you can provide those for your most dedicated, most engaged fans, customers, readers, loyalists, whatever the case might be, that's the stuff that's really gold, platinum even.
Questions?
I was wondering how you got into gamification.
So my background is not really in game design, but the way that I look at this space is I have about I've been working on the web more or less since 1996, and I've been involved in designing solutions for publishers, as FeedBurner was, and as a lot of the stuff that I worked on at Google was, since the early 2000s. And so I've always had kind of a sense of, kind of going back to the whole metrics thing and that FeedBurner chick that I showed earlier on. Here's a system that helps somebody who's creating content better understand the content that they put out there, how well it's supporting what their goals are as a content producer, and how well it's supporting their understanding of their audience. And so what I viewed when I first started talking to the team at Big Door, and when I first started looking at the gamification space, is I looked at this as an area where there's a new kind of engagement, a new kind of motivation that we really haven't tapped before. I mean, we've largely spent with FeedBurner and the work I did at Google looking at systems that would provide analytics and provide an opportunity for advertisers to reach an audience. Much like you can't gamify Piffle, or much like you can't create a game design around content that's no good in the first place, great content or great advertising is also great content. It goes along well with whatever it is that you're putting out there. You've targeted your audience effectively. You've provided a marketer or somebody with an opportunity to reach that audience and to do so in a way that gives them a chance to engage with them. I just think the idea of bringing the game mechanics and game dynamics to this space is interesting enough to explore in depth and see where we can get with it. I mean, like I kind of just mentioned with this whole extrinsic versus intrinsic rewards thing, if you see an ad that you like, you view the video, you think it's funny, you click on it, you share it with your friends, because, how many of you guys remember, the Old Spice guy, Isaiah Mustafa, the commercials where, silverfish hand catch and all of that, and the hot tub falls down and he's standing on a motorcycle. All that sort of stuff, that great sort of content, people found a reason to share that, and in that case, that content is pretty excellent. And you want to be recognized for that by, you not necessarily want to be recognized, you just want to get that out there because you thought it was funny, you think your social circle is going to find it humorous too, and you sort of want to be recognized as the, hey, I found this first, that there's some fun and notoriety to that. And I think figuring out, I don't think we're there yet, but figuring out the right mix of recognition systems like points, badges, and leaderboards, as well as things that give you access to content or opportunities that you couldn't have already. It's this whole new platform, this whole new layer of publisher, advertiser, consumer that we're just starting to figure out. And because it's kind of mushy and because the edges of it aren't well explored yet, it's kind of a frontier of sorts. So that's what motivated me. Yeah.
I'll just try to project. So similar to you coming from the event last night, I'm just fresh out of the Seattle Interactive Conference.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And one of the themes that kind of kept coming up, or one of the hot issues was mobile this, mobile.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not something that I personally have ever gotten into. I still don't have a smartphone.
Yeah.
But I feel like, all right, so that eventually, that trend is going to die down or something. Like, what is going to be the next platform for, like, is there a next one? Or how do you, because I feel like a lot had to do with gamification how we interact with our audience,
Yeah.
and how mobile is just the platform of choice, I feel. So I'm wondering what you think might be in the future, what may be happening now.
In the future, there will be hover cars and bubble cities. I think, so what you just made me think of is the gaping hole, slide 14, which wasn't up there. I went right from slide 13 to 15 and never thought to put 14 in there, which is, of course, Foursquare. I bet, how many of you play Foursquare or have played Foursquare on a mobile device? 20%, right? Not bad. So that is essentially a location-based mobile game. It is, you get these cool badges, you find out where your friends are, you check in at places, you get discounts and rewards. Extrinsic type stuff, more, like you get a relationship with this cupcake place and, they give me discounts and I'm the mayor, so I get a free dozen every month or something like that. I don't know how healthy that is. My Fitbit might complain, but so it goes. I think, though, so that's very much a mobile smartphone type app, game, and device. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon, because as computing continues to shrink and capabilities continue to increase on these devices, we're already at a ridiculous amount of computing power on your average smartphone that isn't even being used. There's a lot of excess capacity there. Where I think maybe it's headed, where more gamification or more game design can factor into things, is more like what you saw with Fitbit, more ubiquitous computing. The idea that there's a device or something, maybe even the threads stitched into my clothes have a, what's that, not an RFID tag, but something near field, NFC, near field communication aspect to them. I mean, it can go all Minority Report on us, where I'm being tracked and I'm being offered a latte as I walk past the store because they recognize my hazel eyes from a distance, and so on and so forth. Let's not go there. That's not the future I think we should be building necessarily, right? But the idea that there's going to be capability embedded in everyday things that could certainly have an aspect where it ties back to nope, not bullshit so much. That's my profile. Yeah, I wanted to go to, I guess, ties back to my profile, my analytics dashboard. If I have a central hub where all my numbers come together for me as a person, people are building these companies right now. Maybe I want to compare how I do with my friends. Maybe on Google Plus, I want to say I'm the most visitingest person in San Francisco. I go more places than anyone, and then you start a competition with your friends to see how many different places you can go. And you don't have to necessarily have a smartphone with you, even though this is the most ubiquitous device right now. I just have a feeling that it's going to be, you're going to have hubs for this kind of information, and you're going to have lots of different spokes pointing back into it with the different kinds of devices that you have. And Fitbit, smartphones, smart clothing, I forget the wearable computing, all those different kinds of capabilities, they're kind of coming together. It's just remarkable now how much computing power is just out there lying about. So I think it's going to be more about the applications that get designed for it than the hardware technology. But they got flexible screens coming now, so I think there's going to even be disposable computing. I mean, we sort of already have that today to some extent, but the idea that you'd have a card with a display on it that you could have at a well, maybe not disposable, recyclable, we would hope, but the idea that things would be just something you could use at an event and then wipe and throw away, and it's worth a few pennies, but it would be something that's digital and usable in some future context. I think you'll see that this idea of a game layer in lots of different experiences is going to be more pervasive. I think it's just going to be one of those things where you're going to think about, is there a game mechanic aspect to this? Is there anything I can do to recognize achievement, to encourage further action and further behavior? Whereas right now we mostly just think about, can people get through this onboarding flow? Can people walk through this wizard and set up a new document, or think about more traditional kind of usability challenges? Or does my graphic design match the brand? Am I reflecting the brand attributes of what my client is trying to achieve here? Yeah, probably. These are the kind of challenges that we're thinking about today. I have a feeling that that game design is just going to be one more thing that we're going to think about as we design products, as we design experiences. Yeah.
One of the few baseball fans here who has seen your work on MLBcom.
Oh, okay, great.
But didn't really interact with it.
Yeah.
I used to go to game day all the time, but this past year, because of the at-bat app, I was always on my phone.
Right.
That stuff.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about how do you convince, just as MLB as an example, how do you convince them of the necessity for this sort of stuff? Because obviously they didn't get it quite as much as you want them to.
I think they will. I think that with any larger organization, it's difficult to make certain kinds of changes happen quickly. But the great part was that they were willing to make this experiment happen and see how it worked. And we awarded something like 5 million badges over that period of time. And that was, a nice pile of collectible things that we can figure out what to do with on the next revision. I think that it's kind of one of those things, reinforcement by example. They're going to see the social aspects in other leagues and other sporting events. I think like premiership websites on the other side of the pond, with what you see with football, with European football, you got a lot more of that sort of thing going on, where you'll see this post to Facebook about this big match and that and so on. I think that the fact that the social fabric or social is being weaved into the fabric of all these experiences is just eventually going to become self-evident. I don't think they're going to need a lot of prodding from Big Door or anyone else to realize we've got to share a tweet button on our news articles, but we don't have it over here on these like gamified aspects of our website. So we should probably get to that at some point. And I think, social and gaming naturally go together, as almost every game experience has a 2-player or more player component, or it's something where you're sharing or you're cooperating to create something. I don't know that that's necessarily the case with baseball, but I think that nonetheless having the shared game day experience will only get richer over time. And speaking of mobile and speaking of devices, if I'm at the ballpark and I'm tied into the system on MLB on game day, I'm the same customer. I shouldn't be recognized as a different person in that experience. So if I've opted into having MLB reward me, treat me differently, or at least recognize me as being a really engaged baseball fan, I'd hope that recognition would be to that same profile I've got when I go to the ballpark. It shows up, hey Matt, welcome to Safeco. This is your 5th ballpark this summer. Are you going to complete a tour of all 36 or 32? And, it's like, okay, now that's kind of cool. So, what can they do in that space to tie those experiences, real world and online world together? I think that's a big area.
We got time for one more question, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, gamification of education is a huge space. I think that one of the there are a number of sites where your achievement can be tracked and you can kind of keep your score put together. I mean, in a way, scoring has been a part of education since the dawn of the letter grade, but in terms of something that's more collaborative or something that reflects achievement online, there was I can't remember this presentation. Did I have it up here? No. At the Gamification Summit in September, there was an elementary school teacher from Minneapolis or Minnesota or Minneapolis suburbs that had put some elements in his. I can't remember. I know I'm totally lacking the details, but Gamification Summit, New York, September of this year. Minnesota school teacher. It's going to put all these keywords together, and it would. He had a system to try to improve reading and math engagement for his students, and he had a way of reinforcing that. And he had some, I can't remember the numbers, but they were fairly eye-popping changes on the state test scores as his classes went forward. And his appeal to the assembled gamification and game designers was, we got to focus more on education. I need your help. I can't get the funding from the state that I need to be able to broaden my ability to bring this to more classrooms. What can we as designers, developers, product developers, and there were folks from the major educational software and publishing companies there, what can we do to try to make more of this happen in the classroom? Because if you see somebody going like this when they're playing a video game, how do you get that same, this is something that Jane McGonigal, another big game design and gamification proponent, talks about, is if you can make life more like a game, that level of engagement, when you think about how intensely you focused on some video game you played or some cutthroat board game that you played with your friends in college or something, how do you bring that to the everyday humdrum of the things that we already do? Or how do you bring that to the boring parts of education to make it more interesting? I think about my own experiences with Microsoft Flight Simulator. Not a product plug. I'm a pilot. I love to fly. And as a kid, I always spent a lot of time flying in simulator because it was the closest I was going to get to a cockpit anytime soon. And it turns out experiences like that, yeah, it's very high fidelity. It's this realistic looking cockpit and teaches you a lot about actual flight mechanics. It's so immersive that there are questions on Quora, that sort of curated question and answer site that talk about, could a Microsoft Flight Simulator pilot land a jumbo jet in that, the pilot's had a heart attack scenario, and it's like, and I secretly wish I want the pilot to be okay, but I'd like to be the hero sometime, because I flew Flight Simulator a bunch, and I think I can do that, Just ignore my horrific morality there, just the idea that you would have enough confidence from an experience like that to say, I could, I'm not saying telemedicine or anything like that we would necessarily want to point people to, but if you could have that level of engagement in other stuff, in calculus, I just got destroyed in that. In chemistry, folded, if my chemistry class in high school could have been more like folded, I wouldn't have gotten E's on tests. I went to a high school where they were especially vindictive about poor grades. They gave a vowel. That you didn't get an F, you got an E. So there was no F. E is where it ended. And there's something about that stuck with me over time. And obviously I haven't let it go. So anyway, getting back to sort of your general point, finding ways to bring that game level of engagement to more aspects of education, I'd love to see. I don't have any specific answers, but the guy in Minnesota I think is someone you should go look up. Sure wish I could remember his name.
Really good sites, actually. One is Khan Academy, kind of controversial.
Yeah.
And then the Code Academy for teaching code.
Oh, one other aspect along those lines is Stack Overflow, which is not so much educational, but it's developers helping developers for web application design, and it's gamified in a very simple way. You have a rank, and you're recognized as being a very influential, helpful developer or subject matter expert in a particular technology. And finding simple ways to help tutors and help other students who are experts help each other in a variety of subjects, not just software development. It seems like that they have kind of a similar model. Stack Overflow is another good example of that. So stackoverflow.com, I think, is another one to check out along with the list here.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks for coming out, you guys. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.